Well, as he's already here, this is David Schütz, so he's going to be talking for the next 40 minutes.
Okay. So, hi, thank you for coming to my talk. This is 4 weird Google VRP bugs in 40 minutes by me, David Schütz. Just a quick note, I am very grateful to have so many friendly faces in the audience today, and thank you all for coming. So let's get right into it. We are going to look at 4 bugs today from 4 different Google products. The first will be Google Assistant, then Sign in with Google, then Google Apps script, and finally Google Classroom. Let's start with the first one, the Google Assistant bug. What is the product? It's Google's competitive product to Apple's Siri and Amazon's Alexa. It's a mainly voice-based personal assistant you can talk to. While looking at Google Assistant and Google products as a whole, I noticed something interesting. In a bunch of Google applications, there is this square app drawer in the top right corner, which when clicked opens up a list of Google products. The buttons that show up simply redirect you to the given applications. But clicking this app drawer on a mobile device reveals the Assistant app, which when clicked starts up Google Assistant on your phone. It does this by redirecting to a specific deep link, starting with Google app : // I thought that using this deep link, I could trigger Assistant from my malicious website as well. Around the time of finding this bug, I also found a Reddit post on a home automation subreddit showing an automation around how a user hacked Assistant and executed commands automatically. This should not be possible. The author published a flow for the Automate Android app, which was able to execute Google Assistant commands without any permissions. It simply triggered Google Assistant with an intent on Android, and after waiting 1 second, it started speaking the command out loud via a text-to-speech engine. And this actually worked. This was a bug on its own. An Android app without any permissions should never be able to execute Assistant commands on your account. So knowing about this trick, thanks to Naked42long on Reddit and the previous deep link, I thought I could put the 2 and 2 together. The attack idea in my head looked something like this. First, the victim opens my malicious website. Then I somehow trigger Google Assistant on the victim's device using the deep link I found. And after triggering Google Assistant, I play an audio file with my website, which contains a voice saying a malicious Assistant command out loud. So I created a proof of concept page for this. In HTML, I made a simple A tag that pointed to the deep link I have found. This, when clicked by the victim, opened up Google Assistant on the victim's device, and Assistant started listening for voice commands in the foreground. Just after the victim clicking the button, I also call this open door JavaScript function using the onClick attribute. And what does that function do? It simply plays an audio file on the page with JavaScript. And what's inside the audio? It's a text-to-speech machine saying open the front door. Since we just triggered Assistant, she will hear it and process the query. But the query will be running in the name of the victim's Google account, since it was the victim who triggered the Assistant by clicking on the malicious link. So let's see this proof of concept in action.
Open the front door.
Sorry, it looks like that device hasn't been set up yet.
A disclaimer here, as far as I know, it's not this easy to open a door with Google Assistant. It's supposed to ask you for a PIN code. But I used it for the demo because it sounded the most cool. But if we can talk to Assistant once, we could do a full-blown conversation with her. Here is an example of this, which after 1 click on our link, automatically sends the victim's location to the attacker in an SMS message.
Share my location with
Who do you want to share it with?
062009807691.
I have a text ready with your location. Do you want to send it or add text?
Send it.
Okay. Message sent.
And there is the SMS message with the location. It's pretty amazing. It's two robots talking to each other. So this bug got a $500 reward. I thought, okay, this is what it is. This will be the final bounty. But a few months later, I got a new message. It said, I actually can't read what it said. Hey, David, we were receiving, I can't read it that far away, and it's only small in my screen. It said that they misqualified the bounty amount, and they will send it back to the panel for one more look. And indeed, next week, they issued an additional $4,500 bounty, totaling up to $5,000, which is a standard range for issues like this. So it initially got fixed by completely disabling the deep link. This also broke the assistant button on google.com. But more than a year later, I clicked on it once again on my phone, and assistant triggered again. I wondered, does this mean that I can bypass the fix? Turns out, yes, but there were some weird protections that made it harder. Now, it gave me this error message when my site started to talk that assistant can't start when another app is using the microphone. I found a way to trick this, but don't ask me how. If I started to play music beforehand, this error did not appear. If music was playing, assistant heard my command. But it gets even crazier. It didn't understand my command the first try. I had to add the second try to the proof of concept. So saying the command 2 times while music was playing worked, and it actually executed the command on Google Assistant. So let's see this amazing bypass. Without music,
turn the lights
we get
red.
the error message.
Turn the lights red. Turn the lights red.
It's hearing it, but try again, it says. Why not try again?
Turn the lights red.
And there it goes, and I even hit the table. It's so cool. Like, for the second time, it heard it and executed the command. Like, this is like crazy at this point. But this bypass got an additional $3,000 bounty. The takeaway here, in my opinion, is that microphone input should not be trusted. And since voice can't be trusted, you should not let a third party start an authenticated listening session in the name of the victim. Because this is what happened here. I was able to start an authenticated voice session as an untrusted third party in the name of the victim. So moving on to the next one, the Google sign-in bug. What is Google sign-in? Google sign-in allows applications such as websites to use Google to log their users into their product, and also allows them to access or modify data from the user's Google account if the user grants the permission. OAuth is the name of this standardized flow that Google and many other providers also offer. This is how an OAuth flow looks like in a very simplified way. You have an application which wants to log the user in. It redirects the user to Google, and then Google asks the user, do you really want to sign in? And you say, yes, I want to sign in. And then Google redirects the user back to the application with a token that the app can use to access the user's data. This is OAuth in a very big nutshell. To start this login flow, the application has to redirect the user to Google. The URL for that looks something like this. It includes a bunch of parameters which are not really relevant at the moment, but the important part here is the scope parameter. In that parameter, you can specify what permissions you want to request from the user. In this example, we are requesting access to the user's AdWords data and Gmail data. And this is what the user sees after getting redirected to this URL. They can select which of their Google accounts they want to use to sign in. You might be familiar with this page already. After selecting the account, the next step is to approve or deny the requested scopes. The flow of this changed a little bit since finding the bug, but the core logic is still the same. So for example, here, if you want to give test application access to your Gmail data, then you would have to check the box. While testing, I noticed that there is some other stuff on this page. On the bottom, there are two links, privacy policy and terms of service. When you click them, you get redirected to some predefined URL by the owner of the application you are signing into. Those are the two links. An owner of an application can set these links up in the Google Cloud Console when registering their application. So here you just simply put your privacy policy link and it will show up in the login flow. So I was testing this login flow, like the Google login flow as a whole, and was looking at the proxy logs when I noticed something weird. I clicked on one of these links, got redirected to my site, but the request to my website included some unexpected data. This is the HTTP request to my site, and it included a referrer header. The referrer header is intended to contain the URL of the previous page that opened your site. And here it contains the URL, and it really contains the URL. If you can see it, it's quite big. Not even just the origin, the domain name, but the whole URL with all of its parameters. And it includes what looks like some pretty sensitive parameters, such as the port parameter and the approved scope parameter. What are these parameters for? The port parameter identifies your current state in the OAuth flow. I think it is some kind of encrypted data. It's a big, long text, basically. This should not really be public. It's only in the URL for the user while performing the login flow. But now we have access to it since the referrer header leaks it when the victim clicks on the privacy policy link. Also, the approved scope parameter, which was used at the time, included a list of scopes that the user has pre-approved with a pop-up. The flow looked a little bit different at the time. We will see it in the proof of concept video later on, but it basically popped up a model for every requested permission, then asked the user to decide whether to grant it or not. And after going through all of these pop-ups, the user was presented with a summary screen showing their choices. And this is where the approved scope parameter was used. So essentially, this parameter contained a list of scopes that should be checked in the UI. So at first, I was really hopeful that with these sensitive parameters, I could maybe pull off some very impactful attack, like a full account takeover. Unfortunately, after a lot of trial and error, I failed to escalate that impact. So I had to fall back to a more quote-unquote lame attack scenario. Here is what I could do. Whenever the victim clicked on the privacy or the terms of service links, I got the referrer URL in the request to my site. Since that URL included all necessary parameters, most importantly the port parameter, I could now redirect the victim back into the OAuth flow to the same state where she was when she clicked on the privacy policy link. And since now I had full control over the URL, I could simply put all of the scopes I initially requested into the approved scope parameter before redirecting the victim back to that URL. The victim who got redirected back to the login flow now had all of the scopes in a checked state, even if she had declined these scopes beforehand. This was the proof of concept I made for this in simple JavaScript. It first parsed the URL that we received from the referrer header and printed its contents to the page. After waiting 5 seconds, it added the YouTube scope to the approved scope parameter and redirected the victim back into the login flow. The YouTube scope was now checked. So let's see this proof of concept in action. So We start a login flow here in video. We get this app isn't verified warning. This is because all apps that want to request sensitive information must go through some kind of business verification with Google. In the real world, even though an app is verified, it can still turn malicious and exploit these vulnerabilities. So this does not provide any protection. This just means that my test application is not verified. So we get to the login screen. There is the pop-up I was talking about previously. Every permission got this pop-up. And here the user clicks deny, so it denies the YouTube permission. Then this was all of the permissions that we asked for. We get to the summary page and YouTube is unchecked indeed. Then the user clicks on the privacy policy link, gets redirected to our malicious site, waits 5 seconds, gets redirected back into the flow, and the YouTube scope is now checked. So what this means that this still required some social engineering, since the victim had to not notice this and click continue. It required the victim to first click on the privacy policy link, and second, not notice that the privacy policy page actually opened up in a new tab. So now there were 2 tabs open. And third, not notice that the scopes that she had previously declined are now in a approved state, so it's checked in the UI. But if the victim did not notice any of this and click continue, we got access to permissions that the user didn't want to grant. So anyways, I reported it as is, and I was expecting a low or non-existent bounty. To my surprise, it got a $6,000 bounty, and I was quite surprised. I thought this was a lame bug. So I asked why the bounty is so big, and I thought they had probably found a way to take over an account or do something very impactful that I failed to do myself. But turns out no, this lame bug, it was worth 6K. To be more precise, it was worth 5K plus a 1K bonus. This is what they said. Essentially, I can't read it again, but in a summary it says that the impact was equivalent to an XSS, and XSS has a reward range of $5,000, and because they liked the report and the bug was interesting, they added a $1,000 bonus. So the takeaway is to use a strict referrer policy. The referrer policy is a header or meta tag sent by your web server, which can be used to configure the way the refer header works, basically. You can set it up to only include the domain name and nothing else. And actually, in current browsers, this should be the default behavior now. I think Google did not actually use refer policy, but some other magic to fix this, but it works. Clicking the privacy policy link now only sends accounts.google.com in the referrer and nothing else. Moving on to the next one, the Google Apps script bug. What is Google Apps Script? It's a tool to automate workspace products like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides by writing custom JavaScript code, which is pretty interesting. A warning and a disclaimer here that at the time of making these slides, this bug was still, unfortunately, live. I have talked with and warned the Google VRP team about my planned disclosure when creating the slides. Last week, though, a patch rolled out and fixed this issue almost completely. There is still one specific edge case which can be used to bypass the fix, but thankfully it's mostly fixed now. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that I have reported this issue 1.5 years ago in February 2020, and after being unfixed for this long, I do not think it is beneficial to keep it as a secret anymore. Even though it got mostly patched last week, I am really sad to see bugs taking this long to get fixed. Unfortunately, this is not the first time this happens. The classroom bug I'm about to talk about also was unfixed for almost 6 months. In my opinion, that is way too long. Even though it's probably very difficult to prioritize and fix all of the VRP all of the issues that the VRP team receives in a reasonable time. Google, please try to do better. And finally, it's worth mentioning that unlike some other companies and other bug bounty platforms, Google does not restrict the disclosure of these potentially unfixed issues. They have always supported me if I decided to go down the road of public disclosure. So with that out of the way, in AppScript, you can make scripts. Not so surprising. These scripts can do multiple different things, but what we are interested in is the triggers you can set up for them. Setting up one of these helps you automatically run your script when a specific event occurs. An example would be to run a script every time a document is opened. You would use the onOpen event for this. When testing this, a simple attack idea of mine was to try to set up a trigger that points to a document that I did not own. So whenever that document is, for example, opened, my script would run and potentially access the details of the event, maybe the contents of the victim's document as well. So I wanted to try that. To do this via the UI, I had to edit a pre-existing trigger. I did this by first creating an onOpen trigger in my script that pointed to my document, a document that I had full access to. Running this script created the trigger. After I clicked Edit on this trigger in the AppScript UI, and before saving my non-existent edits, I started intercepting the request the page made with an HTTP proxy. In the proxy, I found the outgoing request that edited this trigger, which included the ID of the document it was bound to. So that's the document ID right there that the onOpen event is bound to. I swapped the ID of the document to the ID of the victim's document that I didn't have access to. A side note here is that, of course, for this, I had to previously know the victim's document ID somehow. This is a classic limitation of these IDOR attacks, which applies here as well. You simply have to know the target document's ID first. The trigger saved successfully, and now pointing to the victim's document. With the victim, I opened the target document. Unfortunately, my script did not run. It displayed a warning saying that the trigger is disabled because, quote, you do not have access to the source of this trigger. It was right. This was well protected, so I had to find another way. Did I trick you there? Do you also think this is secure? Well, actually, no. This is the bug itself. So, as you can see, it correctly gave me the permission error, but only after the victim has opened the document. So when the event got triggered internally, it checked my permissions and disabled the trigger since it did not have access to the source of the event. But by doing this, it basically indirectly told me what I needed, that the victim has opened the document. This is kind of mind-blowing. So here is a proof of concept of this bug. I made a proof of concept script which created a new trigger and started polling its state every second or so. As soon as the trigger got disabled, it told me that the victim opened the document and made a new trigger and started polling its state, waiting for it to be disabled. And it did this in a loop forever. So before watching the video, I want to clear up any potential confusion that using this bug, I was only able to tell if an event has happened or not. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually see the details of the event or get the contents of the target document. So let's watch the video. So I first list my triggers. There are no triggers set up. I run my proof of concept script. It says waiting for events. With the victim, I open this document with a cat picture inside it. And in a few seconds, we get the log. Victim opened the document. It says deleting trigger, recreating trigger, trigger recreated, and waiting for events. So it basically deleted the old trigger and made a new one and started polling that state, waiting for it to become disabled. And as soon as I refresh with the victim, it notices it once again and recreates the trigger, doing this forever in a loop. This bug got a $3,000 reward. I hope I was able to trick you for a few seconds in the previous slide and making you think that this behavior was indeed secure, but it looks like that sometimes giving a permission error could be the bug itself. And moving on to the last one, actually I'm doing this way faster than I expected, but I'm not talking that fast, I think. Anyways, moving on to the last one, the Google Classroom bug. So what is the product? Google Classroom can be used for online education. It is a tool mainly for teachers to share information with and assign tasks to students. Classroom loves Google Drive. They have many interesting integrations under the hood. And as hackers, we always get suspicious seeing integrations such as this one, since most of the time they open up a brand new and interesting attack surface. One example of these integrations is that a teacher can attach a Drive document to an assignment and share it with the students. The attachment can even be configured to, quote unquote, make a copy for each student. Pretty interesting. There are also interesting things happening on the student side. A student can add documents to an assignment, and after finishing their work, they can turn in the assignment. Turning in an assignment transfers the ownership of the document to the teacher under the hood and revokes the student's access to read only. A bunch of really powerful actions on Google Drive files. So here we add the new document to an assignment with the student. We write our assignment, finish our task, and then we are ready. We click Turn In. And turning in the assignment actually revokes our ownership of the document and transfers it to the teacher. So, okay, that's fine. That's pretty powerful, but let's move on. When a teacher attaches a document to an assignment and sets its mode to make a copy for each student, all of the students receive a copy of that file, which is then placed inside a shared classroom Google Drive folder with editor access given to the teacher. So the teacher can access all of the copies made for each and every student. As per usual, I wanted to see what happens if I create an assignment which has a document attached to it that I didn't own. For this, I made a new assignment in the UI, started intercepting the requests, and hit the Save button, or Assign button, more accurately. In the HTTP proxy, I found the saving request, and in the body, there was the ID of the attached document. So I swapped the ID to a document that I did not have access to. At first, when I attached it with the normal students can view this file mode, it saved it, but later it only displayed Drive file, unknown file. Basically, when you later checked the assignment, it was loading the preview for the attachment with your own permissions. So if you didn't have permission, you simply got Drive file, unknown file. But something happened when I set the type of the attachment to the special make a copy for each student mode and swapped the ID to the victim's secret document who was in my classroom. When saving this assignment that had the victim's private document attached to it, Classroom wanted to, as described, make a copy for each student. This file copying logic worked in a way that it tried to make a copy from each of the students' perspective. Since the victim's private document was attached, the logic tried to make a copy of the victim's document from each and every student's perspective. For all of them, except for the victim, the copying failed, since they did not have access to the file. But for the victim, the copying succeeded, since she owned the file. So because of this, when the teacher created the malicious assignment, the victim's private file automatically got copied into the shared classroom folder, and editor access was given to the teacher. From this point, the teacher only had to check the shared drive folder or the assignment from the classroom UI, and she was able to see the complete copy of the target document without the victim ever giving permission. So this attack required the victim to be inside the malicious teacher's classroom. But since last year almost every school went online, this was not that hard to accomplish, in my opinion. I myself had to be in multiple different classrooms with potentially malicious teachers inside it. So let's watch it in action. Here we have two classrooms, the same classroom, and the teacher on the left and the victim, the student, on the right. So we create a new assignment. We create a new file. We set its mode to make a copy for each student. And then we get the victim's private documents ID. Of course, the same thing applies here as well. You have to know previously the ID of the document you want to steal. But supposedly we have the ID of the document we want to steal. So we copy the ID. This is a private document. The victim is not sharing it with anyone. And before saving the assignment, we start intercepting the requests, and there is the assignment creation request. And in this request, we find the ID of our document and simply swap it to the victim's private document. So the assignment gets created and the copy gets made for each and every student from each and every student's perspective. So now if we go to the assignment and click on the show work that the student has done, and we click on the student, we see that the student has one copied file. And that copied file is the student's private document. But now, since it's copied into the shared classroom folder, we can open it as a teacher and see the contents of the private file. Basically stealing the private document. This bug got a $5,000 reward. After a while, a fix rolled out which changed this attachment flow in multiple ways. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure if this new template feature got added before or after my report, but I really only noticed it after. This new make a copy for each student flow looked something like this. The teacher saved the assignment which had a document attached to it. Classroom tried to make a copy of the document from the viewpoint of the teacher. If that was successful, the copy was saved as a template. After this, the students were now making a copy of this template and not the originally specified document. This forced the teacher to only attach a document that she had access to, otherwise the template creation failed and the copies were not made. This is where the templates were stored. The caps lock "do not edit" is kind of sketchy and funny at the same time. I didn't put it there, Google puts that there, and it makes you want to edit it. So I was messing around with this new fix, and I found that while I can't really make a new assignment with the victim's document attached to it, I could still almost fully edit a pre-existing assignment. So capturing the assignment edit request from the UI, we can see that now there are two document IDs in the request. One is the original source documents ID, and one is the template documents ID that got copied to everyone. You already know what happens here. I swap the ID of the template and set it to the victim's document. After this, I had to also delete the victim's pre-existent copy of the template from the shared drive folder. Since the victim's copy for this assignment was deleted at this point, when visiting the assignment, the victim got prompted to make a copy. But if you take a closer look, now the target document is victim's secret doc, which we swapped the ID previously to. If the victim didn't pay enough attention to this, she might have simply clicked the Make the Copy button, which would have instantly copied her private document into the shared drive folder and gave the teacher access to it. Once again, some social engineering was required, so this was not really the best. Even though this was not that easily exploitable, I wrote my findings down in the issue ticket. And 13 days later, I received a reply saying that, "Thank you for the new details. I don't think this is just an abuse. I was able to find a way when the click of the victim was not necessary." And this seems to be a different bug than the original fixed attack scenario. Because of this, it will be sent back to a panel for a potential new reward. And indeed, a few days later, this bug got an additional second $3,000 bounty. Big kudos for the VRP team for finding the bug and still paying me out for it, since it wasn't me who found out how to bypass the fix. I still don't know how they managed to pull it off. I think the bounty was rewarded since my findings led them down the path of finding this new bypass. But again, this approach is really cool. The takeaway here, I think, is that permissions don't offer protection if the action can be initiated by a third party. So even though in this case, the user really had permission to copy her own private document into the shared folder, the bug was that the attacker was able to initiate this action in the name of the victim. So you should never let a third party perform actions in the name of another user. I think this is an interesting and kind of scary takeaway to think about in terms of your own applications. And this is it. We went through all of the 4 bugs. Thank you for watching. I hope it was fun.